What's up, everybody, and welcome to episode 1 of Exit Light, a podcast about the Hokies, for the Hokies, by some Hokies. My name is Jackson Tate, and I'm here with co-host and friends Zach Ellis, Collin, Rudis, and Zach DeGrauwe, along with our producer who makes the magic happen behind the scenes, Isaac Wilson. We're super happy to be starting a new project, and we are super thankful for those who decide to listen to us on whatever device you are listening to us right now.
With that being said, episode 1 is officially underway. We thought it'd be a good opportunity to explain who we are, why we're here, and what we're doing. We're all massive Virginia Tech fans. We spend a lot of time talking about all things Hokie sports, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, softball, you name it. We're on top of it. Figured it's something we could talk about. Have fun doing it.
At this point, it's really just for the love of the game. We absolutely don't expect this to earn us anything. No fame, no money, and we know we definitely aren't going to be good at this right now. But we hope that if you are here listening, we hope that you enjoy us making fools of ourselves, and maybe even enjoy our stupid takes and our Hokie sports insight. As mentioned, I am Jackson Tate. I am from Chesapeake, Virginia, and currently living in Chesapeake, Virginia, and I graduated from Virginia Tech in December of 2022.
I'm Zach Ellis. I'm from Newport News, Virginia. I'm expected to graduate 2025 because I took 2 gap years.
Collin Rudis. I'm from Chesapeake, Virginia as well, currently living here. And I never went to Virginia Tech, but Jackson pulled me into the fan club, and here we are.
And I'm Zach DeGrauwe. I'm from Prince George, Virginia. I'm also expected to graduate in 2025.
Yeah, so we got a good group of friends here. We're happy to be here. We're going to jump right into it. Women's basketball is pretty much first and foremost on our minds. It's the most exciting thing happening at Virginia Tech in terms of sports right now. And we had a big week. We went undefeated, two wins, 2 games. We beat Virginia in front of a sold-out Castle Coliseum, and we took down North Carolina in overtime. I was not able to attend the Virginia game, but we have 2 people here that were. So Zach Ellis, tell us about that game. Let's get this started.
Well, so Liz, she really established herself early in that game. She had 20 points in the first half after struggling in Syracuse. I don't know if it was a carry dome, what it was. She just couldn't get her shots falling. But yeah, she really started early and often. She ended 33 points, 18 rebounds. She had 3 blocks. She shot 15 of 25, which that's really efficient for her. Got anything else on?
I do kind of think it's interesting. I remember, I want to say it was the Clemson game when Georgia was out. She hit what, 17? Was it 15 15 field goals in Castle? 15. And that was the new Castle record. Like she set that record. And then what did she tie it again? She tied it 2 games later. It seems like every time Liz Kitley steps onto the floor, she's either tying, breaking, or approaching a record. I feel like every game that we watch, we're always like 5 minutes into the game and we're like, oh yeah, Liz is on like program record alert with like how many field goals she has, how many points she has. And still, she puts up like 25 a game and people are like, yeah, she was quiet. I think that's nuts.
Yeah, it comes so easy for her. Like that turnaround jumper or fadeaway she's got, it's money.
Yeah, I think it's interesting though. So I mean, we're obviously going to talk about North Carolina coming up, but Georgia and Liz had dueling double doubles. They both had double doubles. That was Georgia's first. I know it's not her first double double, but it's the first time they've done it together. And then, that's nuts. Georgia gets her double doubles based off of assists. Liz obviously gets some points and rebounds. So I just think it's nuts. You have these two. I don't want to say studs, but studs that are absolutely just dominating on the court every game, and people are like, "Oh yeah, it's no big deal,"
Dude, I think the crazy part about Georgia is she had 14 assists, but she only had 2 turnovers, so she controlled the game very easily.
Zach DeGrauwe, you were there. Tell us about like the Castle Guard. Tell us like the experience in the student section. Like me and Collin obviously watched you guys on TV. You get a lot of airtime. But tell us about like the environment being a sellout.
Well, Hokie Nation does it the best, man. I mean, I don't really know if we can list off too many programs that can do what Castle Guard can do here in Blacksburg. I mean, I didn't really know it was a sellout until Bailey was out there pregame on the floor saying who's ready to be in front of a sold out crowd. And that's when I looked at the phone. I was like, oh, man, this is going to be packed today. So I told everybody who was coming, I was like, man, you guys should probably get in line sooner. I mean, this can be a big game. And, the general public has been doing great as well. I mean, the students have been doing their part, but I mean, the general public to just travel. And what time was that game at? 6? So you're talking about people that are just getting off work and just going right on over there. I mean, the fans are definitely pouring out. They're committed as well, but I mean, the general public is also just as committed and bought into this program, just like all the students are. And it's really cool because sometimes there'll be like the public will just come, maybe the students will just come, but when everybody's kind of buying in together, I feel like the entire castle is really just a big student section. I mean, it's always packed. I mean, everybody's just right there, and I mean, the energy is just, I feel like it's unmatched. I feel like if you have not seen it, you got to go there. And ESPN definitely, that should have been a game that ESPN should have swooped up and put on prime time, if you ask me. But they'll figure it out. I mean, it's a top atmosphere. It was great.
Something that I always think is interesting. So obviously, I'm a little bit older than y'all too. And so I started at Virginia Tech in the fall of 2018. I got to see 5 seasons of basketball because of COVID. And I remember like being a freshman and a sophomore going to women's games and there maybe being 1,500, like maybe being 1,500. You could get to Castle 2 minutes before tip off and walk down to the front row where you guys sit now. And honestly, even like 2 years ago today, Collin, I think the first time like me and you went to a women's game together, there was like nobody there, and you could walk in last 2 seconds and sit, in the first 4 rows. And I think that's insane how, like, I mean, it's everything that Coach Brooks is building. It's turned from, being kind of like a sidekick sport to all of a sudden being everybody's fan favorite. We're selling games out. We've had 3. We just, we'll talk about that in just a little bit, but 3 sellouts now this season, potentially more because we have a big game against Duke also coming up. And just the change in the culture surrounding like women's basketball and Virginia Tech at the same time, it's insane.
Yeah, and it's crazy. I get there an hour and a half before games, and there's lines waiting for the doors to open. Like it's crazy, and it's amazing to see.
Yeah. So the UVA game was big. Obviously, it's almost a trap game. We come off a big win against Syracuse on the road. Syracuse was first in the ACC when we beat them. And it's kind of like you're playing a UVA team that hasn't won much at all this season, but they did compete against LSU. They've played similar teams and beat similar teams. I'm pretty sure they beat Tulane. Either that or they had a close game against Tulane. They had beat North Carolina just before that, so they're not a bad team. It's just they seem to struggle finishing. And so I was nervous thinking it was going to be a trap game coming off a ranked win. But at the same time, it's Virginia. It's the big one like in the state, in the Commonwealth. And they came out good. I would say they came out good. It wasn't great. I think they shot the ball well.
Yeah, their point guard, she was impressive.
Yeah,
I'll give her
Kimora
that.
Johnson was on fire.
Yeah,
and she's a freshman, and that's scary, thinking like 4 years down the road. But it was close. I mean, I think we had like a 6-point lead at halftime. Maybe 6.
Yeah,
it was within single digits, and they kept it close. But the third quarter, Collin, me and you watched that game in Chesapeake together. Like, what do you remember? Like, I mean, how was that for you? Like, I mean, I know you, like, we watch games on TV all the time, but like, it kind of felt to me like there was like that third quarter was just a turning point.
Yeah, no, I just seem like going back to the whole Liz thing. Seems like every time she touches the ball, it's just automatic points. Every time she's got the ball in her hand in the paint, just put them on the board. She's not going to miss. And that's why Georgia gets to assist too, because Liz is bigger than everybody on the court. So throw it up to Liz, let her finish, automatic.
Yeah, it's insane. I just remember, so obviously we were out there cooking Thursday night during that game, and I walked back into the living room, and all of a sudden we're up by like 15, and I'm like, I don't know how this happened. Like I mean, I didn't mean to not pay attention, but it happened so fast that we were up. And truthfully, I mean, I think we won by 13. Like the final score was 76-63, right? And at one point we were up by 20, right? Like we were up by over 20, and then Virginia just found a way to stay in the game. They never really got close enough to do any damage, but they stayed in the game. I mean, I don't know if it was different for me, but was there ever like a sense of like, oh, we should be up by a lot more than this in Castle?
Well, Zach, I want to mention when we kind of went on that flurry and took that lead, we actually disappeared. We went down to the court to do the mini game. So we didn't see their little comeback. So we didn't feel the sense of worry. I mean, we had the confidence in them always, but.
Well, I mean, you always talk about being close and everything, but as far as getting worried, I mean, it's once Liz and Georgia get going, I mean, the lead only really gets close when people start like kind of missing their threes. I mean, this is a team that's not even really hitting their stride yet. This team isn't really red hot yet. I mean, when we got to about the end of February last year, that's when it really started cooking into March. But I mean, you're talking about a team this year that you could probably argue they can shoot better this year than last year. I mean, Olivia Summiel is coming along right now. She's really fitting almost that piece that Sol was running, and she's really shooting the ball well. You got Karis Baker who can come off the bench and give you, maybe 2 threes off the bench for serviceable minutes. And I mean, it's just a team that when they're hot, like, how are you going to guard it? I mean, one of the things that, I mean, we'll get into it later, but I think Matilda was definitely a piece this year that, and she's not even really reached the point to where it's like, okay, you know what, we're going to expect like, 15 or 20, but I feel like it's coming. And I mean, yeah, we'll definitely talk about that later. But I mean, there's just so many pieces here that, yes, the games can get close, but I mean, Tech can pop a 30-point lead like it's nothing at this point. I mean,
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Samuel, she played 32 minutes in that game, and she had 7 rebounds, 2 blocks, and she's always showing effort, and that's huge. We need that. And the big thing I took, Taylor, she took 10 threes in that game, which shows the confidence she's starting to build. Because we'll talk about it later, but in NC State, she only took 1 3. And now she's taking 10, and her shot is so pretty. Every time she shoots, you think it's going in. So her building that confidence, I know Georgia talked about it in the post game after UNC, how she's building that confidence in her, and they all have the confidence that every time she shoots, it's going in. So those role players are huge for us.
And going back to like UVA starting to come back at the end, it seemed like part of that was because they started pressing every time that Tech would get the ball, and Tech had trouble getting the ball down the court. But then they moved Liz to the middle. Once again, like earlier, throw her the ball. Ain't nobody big enough to get it from her. So get it to her, let her make a move, and then move the ball up the court.
It's interesting because that's the trouble against the presses in our notes. And I was just thinking to myself, I was like, truthfully, that's one of the big things we struggled with last season. If I remember, like the Duke game, the last game that we lost, obviously not counting LSU, that's all they did. They pressed, they were physical. They really made it difficult for us to get the ball up the court, and it really caused us to get into the half court offense. And all of a sudden that, like we have like 12 seconds compared to 24, you know what I'm saying? And so it was interesting to see that UVA started to chip away at the deficit once they started pressing hard. Although I'm glad it happened because I feel like that's going to prepare them for like down the stretch. I remember, we struggled against the press against Duke in the regular season last year. And then it happened again. It happened again against Louisville in the championship game. That's kind of when they started to chip away at it late in the final. And just like Collin said, they hit Liz in the middle of the floor on it felt like a football play where she got the ball and then she was able to just dump it like on a little toss, and that ended up breaking the half court and getting us across half court. Then they fouled and basically sealed it for us. And then it happened again against Tennessee and again against Ohio State. And it seems like, just having that experience, how to break the press is really beneficial when it comes down to these like close quarter games, like obviously like you'd rather Virginia Tech win by 35 every game, but it's not going to happen when you're playing good teams like you are in the ACC. So it's something that's it's, I don't want to say concerning because it's there, but it's something that you grow from, just like playing Iowa, just like playing LSU. It's it's there. It might not be awesome, but you learn from it, you grow from it, you get confidence, you get experience, and it's something that's going to make a huge difference in March. And that's where you'd rather be good. I'd rather win in March than win in November. So,
well, kind of what you had said. I mean, everything that we kind of go through now. I mean, Kenny Brooks is a good coach. So, I mean, they definitely got all their. Even though they can win by 20, I'd put a large amount of money that he puts on the tape and says, "Well, we got to do better. We're going to take this piece we didn't do well. We're going to practice on this. That's going to build our next game." And I know we kind of get into it later, but what Collin said, no one's really big enough to really guard Liz. But what we kind of have going for us right now is the only person on the court that might be able to guard Liz with size and everything happens to just be in our rotation as a true freshman. So we'll kind of get into that, but Collin's got a good point.
Yeah, you're talking about true freshmen getting minutes, and it's something that happened a lot at the end of the UVA game. I feel like there was a point where we subbed in Samaya, we subbed in Karis Baker, Carly Wenzel played a lot of minutes in the UVA game, Clara Strack, and that's something that you've seen pretty much all season. You've seen, last season we played a rotation of 7 girls. That's it, 7 girls. Primarily 6. Deasia Gregg was really the only one that played big minutes off the bench, and other than that, it was the 5 it was Georgia Liz, Kiana Traylor, Kayla King, Taylor Soule. That's it. Taylor Guyman came off the bench a lot, but primarily those 6. And this year, you'd be kicking yourself. You'd be absolutely lying to yourself if you're thinking that we don't have the depth. We have, and it's not just like depth for fun. Like it's not like you're pulling random girls off the bench. Each one of them, each of the 9 or 10 girls that play can contribute at any given time, and we've seen it. But speaking of contributions from true freshmen, we had some big ones on Sunday. We got the win at UVA. We turned the corner, immediately go into a ranked matchup in a place that I don't want to say has been a house of horrors, but it's been a place that has been tough to play at for Virginia Tech in Carmichael Arena in Chapel Hill. The 4 of us here and Isaac, who is also on the call with us, all got to attend. We got to make Collin and Isaac came in from Chesapeake. Isaac flew in from Wisconsin, and you guys came in from Blacksburg to catch the Sunday matinee in Chapel Hill, where Virginia Tech ended up getting a 9-point overtime win against the Tar Heels for it's just another ranked win in the Kenny Brooks era. So your thoughts on the game?
No, it seemed like it started well, and then like they started hot, and it was a very very up and down game for both teams. Both teams took runs, although it seemed like every time, like the whole game, Tech had a lead, except I think there's only 2 times that I can remember UNC having a lead. And it seemed like each time they got up by 4, and then Tech just came right back. First half was tight. Tilly hitting the little buzzer beater. What that? So to go up by 5 at the half, I think.
We were up by 6 at halftime, I think.
Okay, 6. That was big. That was big for the momentum to take the halftime or take that into halftime. And then seemed like UNC came out hot in the third. They seemed like they could not miss. And fourth quarter just seemed like it was both teams were matching each other. And then obviously ultimately went to overtime. Tech banged 3 threes in overtime. That basically was the dagger.
I think it's interesting. You talk about North Carolina came out hot in the second half, and it's almost criminal that Courtney Banghart came out in her press conference saying that Virginia Tech does not play defense well, because I feel like they're not. I mean, it's not flashy. That's what Kenny Brooks says. It's what David Cunningham says. They're not flashy. They're not blocking shots off of people. They're not stealing the ball like Hannah Hidalgo from Notre Dame, but they're playing good defense. They're contesting shots. They're getting rebounds. They're forcing long possessions. I feel like that's like the epitome of what Virginia Tech women's basketball is. But you look at the stats, and North Carolina shot 31.8% from the field on Sunday. That's not a great number by any means, and it's not a bad number by any means. But you talk about like where the game was won, and Tech out rebounded North Carolina 52-40.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that it's not a big flashing number in the box score, but it's one that really paints the picture on why Virginia Tech ended up winning that.
18 offensive too.
Yeah, Jackson, I'm glad you brought that up. So when you think of UNC, you think of their defense pretty much. Deja Kelly. When you look at the stats, though, for the season, opponents' points per game, we allow 60, which is 80th in the country. Not great, but UNC is 60.7, which is 100th in the country. You look at the three-point percentage defended. They shoot 28.4% against us, wow, 31% against UNC. And then overall field goal percentage, we're 26th in the country at that. So to say we're not a good defensive team, or quoting from her, defense is not really what they do well, it raises the question.
It raises the question, specifically from a coach who has been all in the archive of sound bites recently. It seems like everywhere she walks, she's making enemies from rival fan bases. We're looking at you, NC State. Zach, it's funny. We obviously got to go to the game. All 5 of us were there, as well as like 20 more of our friends. You guys brought a bunch of people from Blacksburg. We obviously we made the trek from Chesapeake, and we got there early. We got there right when the doors opened. We got the front row right across from the Tech bench, and we pretty much turned that arena into a mini Castle Coliseum. I remember looking down at you guys to my right the entire game, just watching you guys go nuts. Tell us about like the environment. Like, I mean, I know it doesn't compare to Castle, but tell us about the environment.
Well, for starters, it seemed like the pep band in front of us only did chants when we started doing chants. I'm a strong believer that if the the mic wasn't so heavy for them, you'd probably hear us singing Enter Sandman. And after that, during that first possession, if you listen, you can hear us saying offense while they say defense. So I'd say for about the 30 students that were with us, we probably accounted for, every one of us probably counted for like 4 of the other people that were in there. But I mean, it was just so much maroon and all that there. Hokie Nation travels. The environment was great. Thought the game was like really well. I mean, obviously it's not exactly what we wanted, obviously you want to win, like Jackson said, for like 35 every game, but it's at that point right now, given how good the ACC is, win by any means necessary. So there's not really, there's never going to be a bad win from this point forward, or I don't really think there is a bad win. I don't even know if that's ever been stated, but great game, and great atmosphere. Hokie fans travel, and Kenny Brooks even mentioned that in the presser, which I'm sure that we'll get into. But we love the team, and they love us too. So it's a great thing we got going right now. It's pretty special.
Yeah, going off that point, here, let me do this one, Jackson. I'd say it was probably about at least 70-30 UNC to Tech fans there, if not more. We traveled, and watching the press conference, Georgia mentioned how she could hear the Let's Go Hokies during the UNC intros. So the fact that they could hear that shows how loud we were, shows that we actually made an impact. And yeah, we traveled.
I also want to make a point. There was a big group of alumni sitting behind us as well. And I was talking to them, and they said they had a bus of like 50 to 60 of them that came down from Blacksburg. So shout out to them as well.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is there seems to be this misconception that only students can get hype, which is really funny. Obviously, we made a 3.5 hour drive from Chesapeake. We all had to work on Monday. Isaac flew back to Wisconsin on Monday. I just think it's interesting. You have Hokie Nation, who is, you can tell that they are the most passionate about their teams. It doesn't matter if it's football, men's basketball, women's basketball. You know that the Hokies are going to show up for their teams, and it's awesome. It's the best fan base in the world. And people that don't see it, they're either blind or they're jealous. Truthfully, that's it. So I do want to talk about this. This is the one thing that I gathered from the UNC game is Virginia Tech led the game for 32 minutes, but the lead never got anywhere over 9. They never led. They led by about 4 to 6 for most of the game, and it never really got any larger than that. And then UNC, UNC led for 6 minutes total, and they were tied for about 7. And it shows that Tech's defense was good. Yes, we've talked about that, but it also shows a lot about how composed Virginia Tech was. They came out of the second half just like Duke did. Tech had a 6-point lead. All of a sudden, North Carolina starts hitting shots, and you blink, and we're not even at the first media timeout, and North Carolina's ahead. And they didn't like curl into a ball. They didn't start getting nervous. They didn't start forcing shots. They just said, screw it. This is our game. They're not taking this from us. We're going to focus. And, even the shots didn't really start falling then, but they locked in defensively. Kenny found a lineup with Clara on the floor, and they just started, they played good defense. Georgia hit a 3 to tie the game or maybe take the lead again. And from that point, you just knew that they were in control. I just think that's insane. It's important for later. It's a big win. We got to win against a team that was ranked. But the stuff that you get from this is more important down the road,
Yeah, and it wasn't like anyone had like a dominant game either.
Yeah.
Like early on, Liz was money. She was hitting everything.
Yep.
And then from there on, she got really good looks. They weren't falling. But she did get 15 rebounds. So she didn't let the shooting struggles affect her game.
Couldn't buy a bounce. Every shot they put up, if anything hit the rim, just away, gone. Every time UNC hit a rim, bouncing in.
Yeah, it was just unlucky.
In, whatever. Tech could not buy a bounce.
See, but we say we can't buy the bounce though. But didn't she have 15 and 15? Like Zach said. I mean,
yeah, it was a really quiet.
It was.
Yeah, I mean, you look at. I feel like if you look at any other person, they're like, "Oh my gosh, man, that's such a good game." But
yeah,
I mean, the fact that we're saying 15 and 15 is quiet, just kind of tells just exactly like once the whole team is really on, just how much damage this team can really do. I mean, 15 rebounds is 15 rebounds.
Exactly what Jackson said earlier. It seems like Liz just every game she's expected to put that up. So it's like, oh, she only scored 15. Like what a bad day for her. But in reality, like that's a great day for anybody else. But the expectation is just so high for Liz that it's like that's considered a bad game for her. When in reality, it's not at all.
Yeah, and I want to highlight like the players you don't think of. Like when you think of Virginia Tech, you think Georgia, you think of Liz. But Carly Wenzel, she had those 2 huge threes in the first half, which kind of weathered the storm once UNC started to come back. Tilly, she was huge for her. She had 8 rebounds, which was her season high. Like Collin, you mentioned the buzzer beater in the half, and then those huge threes in overtime, especially the one I think it was 9 seconds in the overtime period. That really just set the tone for how it was going to go. And then Clara, 22 minutes for a true freshman is insane. And she had 3. And what?
In a big game.
Yeah.
It's not like she's playing that in a garbage game. Like that's a big conference game. A ranked
exactly.
Game.
A true freshman. And she had those 3 huge offensive rebounds to just keep the possessions going.
It's something that I noticed though. It's so obviously it seemed like just about when the fourth quarter started, Liv was out. She was in foul trouble. But they basically ran the same rotation the entire fourth quarter. They had Liz and Clara playing down low, and obviously Liz Kitley is Liz Kitley. She is going to take over games. She's even if she's not scoring, like you saw this against Syracuse like last weekend. She's might not be scoring. She might not be having a great game offensively, but nobody's going through her on the other end of the floor. Like she's blocking, she's rebounding, and then you add Clara Strack to the mix, and I can't tell you. I mean, granted, we were sitting right in front of there, lined up with the basket, but I can't tell you how many times I saw Clara Strack come out of nowhere grabbing a rebound, and then also getting the ball, in transition. How many times did we see, a big defensive play turn into a bucket for Virginia Tech? We had Liv dive on the floor, get the ball out to Liz, and then all of a sudden Liz gets the ball to Georgia, and you blink, and all of a sudden Tilly has the ball in the basket. And that was one of those moments that, like, it was kind of it was up in the air. North Carolina was kind of clawing back, and all of a sudden Tech just says, no, that's our momentum, and you could feel it. You could feel the air get sucked out of that arena. Like every time, it felt like that typical Virginia Tech basketball game where we're coming back, and then all of a sudden the other team hits a three. But it seems like those moments are for us now.
That went for Tech this time.
Yeah.
And it was 9 seconds at overtime.
My favorite moment from the game, other than obviously winning, is late. I think it was in the fourth quarter, and I want to say it was Lexi Donarski got a pass from Deja Kelly, and all of a sudden she's driving, and Clara Strack comes through the paint out of nowhere, blocks the ball off of her head, and the ball goes out of bounds. And that's a moment where I think Carolina was trying to take the lead. I think that was kind of late in the game, and all of a sudden, and I look over at Courtney Banghart and their assistant coaches, and they're trying to get the review, and I'm like, girl, that ball domed her. Like, it's still bouncing. Like, she blocked that thing off her head. And I just thought it was a funny moment, sure, but it just shows like the composure too. Like it takes skill to block a basketball. It takes even more skill to block the ball and get possession. And you see Liz do that all the time. Now you see Clara. I think Tech's in good shape.
There's definitely more of a conversation for that down the line, like over the summer and the off season we can discuss, but we'll get there down the line.
So the last thing that's interesting is I'm listening to the press conference after the fact, and Coach Brooks is talking about how Virginia is the geographic rival. We all know that. We always compete for it being our state. You see it in the back of Zach's background. It's our state. Virginia Tech runs the Commonwealth of Virginia. But he talks about the rivalries in women's basketball kind of coming from the teams that you have to play tough. Recently that's been North Carolina. We've had big games against North Carolina. Our last two overtime games in program history are both against UNC. And that's what he said in his press conference. But we're going to talk about another big rival and a massive game coming up on Thursday against NC State. If you didn't watch, if you haven't been paying attention, North Carolina State just took down Louisville last night, Monday night, to move to 7-3 in the ACC. But more importantly, it drops Louisville to second, or maybe tied for first. But either way, Virginia Tech is in the lead of the ACC heading into Thursday's extra large matchup against the Wolfpack in Raleigh. We talk about big games all the time. We've talked about Iowa and LSU, and beating North Carolina, beating Syracuse on the road. I don't know if any one of these games gets bigger than this in terms of this season. This is one of those games that will really, I want to say make or break, because it's not that, but you win this game, you put up a showing in this game, and all of a sudden the world's like, oh yeah, they're back, they're for real. It's the Virginia Tech we thought we were going to see this year.
Yeah, like if you lose this game, you're not going to get dropped too much. But if you win and you have 2 wins against NC State, you skyrocket. And that would be huge for the tournament.
Most of the year, right?
Yeah, top 5 pretty much all year.
Top 10 all year. The lowest they dropped was they dropped to 7 after Tech beat them? And now they're right back up to 3? Also, I just looked. Louisville and NC State are both 8-2. Tech is 9-2 in conference.
Yep.
Yes.
So it's interesting. You talk about big games, and we obviously had a big game in Blacksburg on January 4th, where Virginia Tech took down NC State on a last-second shot from Liz Kitley. It was huge. It
And
was
a crazy pass from Kayla.
Yeah, it was a huge win. It's one of those massive wins in program history, in front of a sellout. It was the loudest. It was the loudest I had ever heard Castle in my life. But there's a couple outliers from that game. Let's not discredit Tech's defense. We've talked about it already on this podcast. Tech has good defense, and it seems like when it gets down to clutch time, they are clutch. But North Carolina State didn't score in 8 minutes. That's not going to happen again. They didn't score in the last 8 minutes of that game. It's not going to happen again unless the basketball guides decide they're going to favor us for the rest of eternity. Also, they didn't have River Baldwin. Their starting center did not play. She hurt her ankle like a couple days before that game. Did not play. So it's a whole new ball game. River leads the team in rebounds. She leads the team in blocks. Obviously, she's a center. She's good, but she does change the game for them. They have Sanaya Rivers. They have Isaiah James. Madison Hayes went off against us. I'm sure she's going to go off again. That's just how Virginia Tech basketball works, But what are y'all's thoughts leading up into that game? Like, obviously it's big. We know it's big, but like, what do you think the keys are for Virginia Tech to get a win?
Get Liz the ball.
Yeah,
every game, get Liz the ball.
I'll say defensively, you kind of mentioned it right there. Madison Hayes, she's playing really well right now. I mean, last night she played all 40 minutes, which that's impressive. She had 12 points, 10 rebounds. Over her last 4 games, she's averaging 14 and 9. So she's going to be an X factor for them. I think for us, obviously, we need to rebound. Liz, last game, 27 and 12. I expect something similar to that again, although River Baldwin, she's going to make it tough. But I think the big X factor for us is Matilda Eck. Last game, she was 0-for-1 from 3 when we played them. And we only made 6 threes in that game. And like we mentioned earlier, her confidence has skyrocketed. So I got a feeling she's taking more than 1 3 this game.
Yeah, it was such a weird game for Tilly. She seems to play a lot of minutes. She did play 25 in January, but she had points. She was 3 for 5 from the floor, 0-for-1 from 3. I think it seems to me that since that game she's gotten hot. We saw her go off against Rutgers, which was before that, but I mean, she's been shooting the lights out of the ball as of recently. I feel like there's going to be more confidence there. I would say my key is stay out of foul trouble. It seems like every time that Tech struggles this season, they've been in foul trouble. Granted, you can't really prepare to get hosed like you did against Caitlin Clark. You can't really prepare against the physicality that is LSU. But how many other times have you seen unfortunate foul calls go against Tech that really just determines or has like a part in determining the game? You talk about Florida State, you talk about the physicality of Duke, and you gotta avoid that. You gotta play tough defense, but you gotta not foul. And we're talking about Tilly, we're talking about Kayla King mostly. Kayla King is one of the best on ball defenders in the country. But because of that, she gets the most fouls called on her. And so if you can stay out of that, you have a real chance to win. I think Tech goes into this game better than they were. I think they go in this game playing better than they did when they played in January.
Yeah, going off that point of foul trouble, it's crazy. You see Kayla, she always gets called for like a little arm bar, like not much contact. And then up in Castle, I mean, you can see contact, but being so close at North Carolina, you see all the contact that Liz has to fight through. And we see her get slapped in the face and not get calls. And then you see Kayla just do an arm bar when she gets called for that. So, yeah, staying out of foul trouble, that's going to be big. And hopefully the touch fouls don't get called and all that.
For me more so, I'm kind of looking at this game and I know, Kitley's going to get hers. I'm sure that Georgia is definitely going to get hers. But I'm looking at, as you guys said, I'm looking at Matilda, Kayla, and I'm also looking for Summiel and Baker to keep doing their stuff. Summiel has definitely taken some shots the last few games that three she took first, like the first quarter, what was that, on Sunday? Definitely, like when she makes her threes, like it helps out a lot. And I feel like it's just more so about those others. But the bigger thing here is that we always kind of stress, especially it was me at the beginning of the season, that once Matilda starts to get it going, this team's going to be pretty hard to stop. And I think you're starting to see Matilda really start to hit her shots, and it's been really difficult for other teams to kind of stay back in. I mean, Tilly hit those clutch threes in overtime, and it was kind of over after that. Clara Strack's playing better and better and more better every game. So I think, yes, they're going to have River back. I think you have to credit, their guards and stuff, but they don't shoot the three ball like extremely well. And, anybody can shoot the ball well any night, but I'm looking around at our team and they're going to have River, but I'm also looking at everybody else that we have that's playing up here when they were all kind of down here. They're getting better every game. So, I mean, if you ask me, I feel like we have more pieces that are stepping up to the moment. Whereas you said, what's her name for NC State just played 40 minutes. I feel like we're getting more quality time from the bench, but not just quality time, it's quality points as well. So for me, that's what it's about, is everybody who has been stepping up, keep stepping up and hitting those shots. And I feel like Tech can do it, and I expect them to. So I'm with it.
You talk about like Virginia Tech playing more connected. You talk about how they're meshing and they're playing better as a group than they were earlier in the season. And that's a large part of that is playing in big games. We've had wins and losses against tough teams, and they're still in good shape. But we're going to talk about the rotations and how you can throw any lineup out there. The last quarter of the game in January, they ran the same five girls the entire last quarter. Seems to be kind of a theme. It's kind of what happened against NC State on Sunday, or North Carolina on Sunday. But against State in January, they ran Georgia, Liz Kitley, Kayla King, Karis Baker, and Carly Wenzel the entire fourth quarter. And those are two freshmen, and obviously are the three girls that have been here the longest. But two freshmen, and I was in Castle for that game, and it seemed like just about every possession, Karis or Carly were coming down with huge rebounds. That's a smaller lineup than what Tech typically plays. Obviously Liz is towering over the rest of the girls on the court, but Karis and Carly, they're tall. They're not short by any means, but they played a smaller lineup and they went to war, and they dominated that last quarter. It was 8 minutes that State went without a bucket, and we were down by 13 points and came back and won the game in regulation, and had the lead for about a minute and a half at a point before NC State, or before Sinai Rivers scored right there at the end. And I think it's just it's something to look out for, but it's also something to be really happy about for Virginia Tech moving forward, is that you have all of these rotation combinations that are working and that can work. And you see that, like, when Coach Brooks sees something that he likes, they're connected, they're playing good basketball, he lets them rock. And I think that's something to expect for this game on Thursday. I also don't think Georgia's going to have a tough first half like she did in January. I remember like watching the highlights after, and she was just smiling, laughing, because it seemed like those shots were 99% of the way into the basket. It's not going to happen again. She's going to be on. She loves playing Reynolds.
But who knows what Kenny will put out there, but I trust Kenny Brooks, and I like that. I like that bet.
Yeah, so what we haven't talked about is the stakes in the ACC. Obviously, this game will be for first place. Obviously we've talked about it being a big win, but you really want. Everybody's looked at the ACC standings. The top 5 teams are within like 2 games of each other. It's us, North Carolina State, Louisville, Notre Dame, Syracuse, and we have games against 3 of the 4. We've played Syracuse already, but we have games against the rest of them. This stretch is huge because you in a league that is as tough as the ACC, you got to have that double bye. You have to be one of those top 4 teams in the final standings because you need that double bye because you don't want to have to play. You don't want to have to go through all those teams to make a run to the final. Ideally, you'd be the one, but it's something to look out for. I think Virginia Tech has a good shot at this. I think the outlook for their season is good. They do play against Boston College on Sunday, right? Back at Castle, they play. I'm sure that's going to be a good crowd. I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of students there, and I look forward to watching that on TV. But obviously, the big one is State on Thursday. Bunch of important things to look out for as when that game comes on. We're on ACC Network at like 8:00 or 6:00. It's 8:00. We have the second game.
I believe it's 8.
It's 8:00 on Thursday. But yeah. So I mean, I don't know, guys. I think it's one of those things that we're all gonna be watching TV, nervous, rooting for the Hokies. But I think they have a good shot.
Seems like they're getting hot again to close out the year, just like last year.
Yeah, going off that, you can't help but look at the similarities from last year with this team. Last year, we go into Duke on January 26th, and we lost, which was our 4th loss of the year. But then we won out. We played amazing after that. And then this year, we go into Duke January 18th. We take our 4th loss of the year. Look at where they are now. They're playing amazing. It's very similar. But I think that'll take us right into men's basketball.
Yeah.
So, Collin or Jackson, you want to start this off about talk about Duke?
I really don't. This is me being frustrated about our Hokies men's basketball, and it's not anything more than out of love. Obviously, we are all more than passionate about our men's and women's basketball. I thought this week was one of the biggest weeks of the season. I thought that I thought they were playing well, but I thought that 2 wins would not only put us in a very good tournament spot. I thought that we'd be either receiving votes or potentially ranked if we won both games. I thought that we'd have. I mean, I know our record's not great. I know we're not doing awesome, but I thought that a win against Duke and a win against Miami on the road, where we've never played well, would end up getting us to a point where they're talking about us off the bubble in the positive, And I thought there was a chance for us to really make some waves there, but unfortunately it didn't happen. And it's kind of just, the same old, where the same issues are the same issues. You guys were there. Me and Collin were not. What did you guys see from the first row?
It was frustrating. Zach, you wanna take it?
Well, I feel like you can look at this Duke game. There's a lot to get in with the men's team. Obviously, you play the non-conference openers at Castle. They win those games. You start to say, okay, you know what? We'd like to see more, but we're happy we're winning. Obviously, they go to that the mini tournament. They get that big win over. Remind me, who is that again? They got
Boise and Iowa State. They were both big.
Yeah, that quality wins. Those were good quality wins. I mean, obviously, would have liked it to be a little prettier, but they found a way to win against 2 tough teams. And then they go against FAU, and FAU is playing good basketball right now. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, you start looking at how they're playing right now, and especially at the beginning of the season, and even into UVA, and heck, even a few games it seemed were 19 points or 20-some points is all we get out of 20 minutes, and that does feel kind of frustrating. But I just feel like there's been times where the fire and energy, especially when you need it, is like not there. Like they'll go on runs and then for some reason it's just not there. I mean, I don't think they played bad against Duke by any means. They opened up those first 5 minutes and everything else. It was definitely there. I mean, the energy was there. Castle Garden, the public showed out again as they do. And it's always great that, even though there are ups and downs in the men's program, that, everybody kind of still buys in and, supports the team. And, that's what we're always going to do because, we love the school, we love the team. So we're always going to be there. But I feel like there's just a few issues with obviously turnovers and then, the it factor just not being there when you got to close it out. And we'll probably talk about the Miami game. But in terms of Duke, I mean, Duke hit their threes and Tech just for some reason couldn't get them to fall. Nickel kind of had a quiet evening. He didn't really play as much as we anticipated, especially since he played against Duke at North Carolina a little bit, But Sean Padula couldn't get him to drop, and Hunter, aside from a few, couldn't exactly get him to drop. But even underneath the basket, it just seemed like it wasn't the Hokies shooting night. They were still in it for about most of it until for like the last 2 minutes when that you have to foul and everything else. And they just start going up from there. But I don't think the game was essentially out of reach. But then again, I feel like, it's a different team than what we've seen the past few years, but I just feel that this team still should have beat them. And that's just kind of how I'm going to feel.
Yeah, and being in the crowd, you could feel the frustration there because we were coming off a weird win against Georgia Tech. Petit really dominated. We really didn't shoot threes very often, but we scored 91. So it was kind of like our best all-around game. And then we go into this one, we can't buy a bucket, and Duke's knocking everything down. And you could definitely sense the frustration, how defense was not closing out on threes as well as we'd like to. And they're a good team, really good team.
I feel like the highlight of the game was NJ, because he seemed to ball out pretty well. He's 17, 3 threes. 17, I believe, is career high. I'm not sure if the threes are, but because he came off the bench and then 34 minutes, and it's a flip of what he's pretty much been good at this year. He seemed great defensively this year, but it seemed like he could never really get the offensive side of the ball going. But hopefully he can turn the tide and start playing well both ways.
You talked about being good defensively, and obviously you're talking about MJ. MJ played, I think this is probably MJ's best game as a Hokie, other than potentially North Carolina and Duke last year.
He played well against Louisville this year too.
Yeah, and you're right, and that was another game where he seemed to just be knocking down everything from behind the arc, which is important. But that's MJ Collins' game. If you're really watching the game, he is insanely good off the ball defensively. He's very good on the ball defensively. And that's the reason he starts. The reason he plays is because he's like a security blanket for the team. Him and Hunter are really, they're really prohibiting players to drive and to, score on the interior. Unfortunately, it seems like a Virginia Tech thing where, they'll force bad shots. They're not big enough to get the rebounds. They'll kick the ball out and they're banging threes. And that is the story of why we lost to Duke. I can't tell you how many times I saw great defense, and the rebound slipped away from one of the players' hands and it gets kicked out to Tyrese Proctor and he jams a three. And, it's just like, my gosh. And how many times did we see him get, we'd be down 9, we'd start scoring, and all of a sudden we'd be down 3 and be like, yeah, the crowd's getting back into it. And then they come down the court and, the ball's in the net before you know it. It's frustrating. I don't think they played bad. I really don't think they played bad. I think defensively it was one of the best games they've played of the season. You held a really good Duke team to 77 points. That's average. It's not terrible. But they were in it. The final score really doesn't show. It doesn't really show the real story of the game. Granted, you give up probably 5 of those points late when they're fouling. And they played okay. It's just, if you get a couple more of those rebounds, you could probably get 3 or 4 more rebounds. I think Tech wins that game. They didn't really, what they had 4 turnovers. That's a season low against Duke. They played a good game. It's just, they couldn't be great everywhere, but they played good.
4 turnovers, but towards the end there, I agree that if they'd gotten a few more rebounds, I feel like it's definitely more winnable, but not when you have, there were a few shots that Sean kind of stepped back. And I will say, there were a few of those where if you put and watch different film, he definitely makes those. I'm not saying it's terrible of him to be shooting that, because he can make those, but given the time and scenario, he wasn't hitting those. I feel like a bunch of those were forced when we had like 20 seconds left on the shot clock. So I feel like, at some point there also has to be a sense of, we got to like slow down, kind of control, see if we can get a different basket, or, pass around like they'll do with Hunter sometimes, pass around 4 times. And even with MJ, we're seeing it more, it gets passed around 3 times. MJ's there wide open for 3. So I feel like they could have taken more advantage of that, but unfortunately they didn't. But not a bad performance by all means. But what was more frustrating was definitely the second game.
That's the one that I really don't want to talk about, because it's one of those games that makes us all want to punch a wall. I'll turn the TV off before the game's over. Against Miami down in Coral Gables, my least favorite arena in the ACC, because none of their fans decide they want to show up to watch basketball. Could not be us. Virginia Tech led. I think Miami they started pretty well, and then all of a sudden Miami started turning the ball over, and Virginia Tech started capitalizing, and Virginia Tech led about the rest of the way until the last 3 minutes of the game, and then they hit 3 minutes to go, and we couldn't hold on to the ball. That's basically it. We couldn't hold on to the ball. We couldn't hit our free throws. It was one of those games where things were going well, and typically we text during the games. I didn't really text y'all. Everything was fine. It was a normal Saturday basketball game. Tech was playing good. Collin, me and you watched that game at my house, and it was fine. And then all of a sudden it wasn't. It happened. It felt like you blinked and it was a 7-point swing, and now Tech's down. We'll talk about the turnovers there. Virginia Tech only had 11 turnovers. They only had 11 turnovers. They had 11 turnovers, 5 in the first half, 6 in the second half. But unfortunately, those 6 turnovers were all costly. I don't really want to talk more about this, but there's a lot more to be said. So y'all go ahead.
They had a lot of foul trouble. Like, I'm looking right here: Couture 4, Padula 4, Nickel 4, and then both of your big men, Lane Kidd had 3, Poteet had 4. Like 7 fouls between your 2 big men. Like, that's where you lose. Like, you're losing it in the paint. You can't stop them in the paint. They just throw it to their big man. It's a layup, or obviously Poteet, one more foul, he out. Like, and then you're down a kid, and after that, it's Pat, who hasn't really gotten his shot yet.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, it's just when you talk about the turnovers, yes, 11, yes, the first half and 6 in the second half, but I don't know if I read it right or wrong. How many? I think Padula had 7, but it's more so when those turnovers came, and it was in those last few minutes where we had everything under control. And then Padula just dribbles into 2 guys, turns it over, they lay it up, and then Robbie Barron just gives it basically right to the guy, and he lays it up.
That was just miscommunication with them. That one was definitely frustrating.
But it's just things that we used to not see with Virginia Tech basketball are happening at a really high rate right now, and it's frustrating because I know what other teams have. Yes, I know that Duke has their players. I know UNC has their players. I get everybody has their X factors, but this team's not bad. Like, the players are not bad. Like, I feel like if everybody just stays on the same page and just, puts their head down and just, commits through it. I mean, it's not a bad team. It's just for something right now with Virginia Tech, with the men's side, it's not where it used to be. I'm not saying that that's coaching or that's a locker room or that's any one player, but I just feel like it's not where it used to be, I guess. And it's kind of frustrating because Jackson was there. He witnessed probably the peak in the last 7 years of basketball, kind of between a few different seasons that were pretty special. And now it seems that 2022 was pretty nice. Or, well, what was that? The beginning of 22, and then, we had 22 to 23, which, had some question marks with like kind of, what's kind of going on, but it wasn't terrible. And now we're at where we're at right now, and I
Not a
just
bad
don't really
team.
know what more to say. It's not. It's the thing is, it's not bad. I mean, Lynn Kidd is playing. Is he playing the best of his kind of college career this season? Would you say, in terms of points and everything else?
Yeah,
He's
coming into
and
that
then-
game, he was first in the ACC in field goal percentage.
So I
He
mean,
was shooting 70%, a little higher.
it's not a bad team, but I mean, we had a great quality win over Clemson. That was really special to watch. They played their hats off that game. Georgia Tech, yes, unranked, yes, not the best team in the ACC, but quality
He played
wins.
great.
Played great against Duke, and then we play great, and then Duke comes, and the fire wasn't there, but then we go to Miami, and it's like, what happened? I mean, they had the lead, they were shooting great, and then it just gets down to those last 6 minutes, or even 3 minutes at that, and I'm not really sure too many people can give a derived answer for what exactly happened. It just wasn't there, and it's not so much that it wasn't there for this one game, but it seems like trends that we've seen throughout the season really hit again. And I feel like every time that happens, the tournament chances just sink. And I feel like this is a team that you used to look at and be like, okay, definitely in the tournament. And I don't know what has to change, but I feel like that's what we got to get back to at this point.
I think what's irritating too. So you beat Clemson, you beat Georgia Tech. You beat Georgia Tech by, what was it, 24?
Don't forget Boston College,
Yeah.
who
But
we
the
haven't
thing is,
beat.
Georgia Tech went and beat UNC. The thing is, like, the thing that I'm getting at is that this Tech team, if they're on, they can compete with anybody in the conference. But when they're off, boy, is it hard to watch. Like, they literally could be the worst team in the ACC, or they could be the best team in the ACC any given night.
You talk about being the best teams in the conference, and we talk about the fact that we went in November or December and beat Iowa State, who is currently a top 10 team, or they're a ranked team. I think they just dropped down to like 18 after a loss to I want to say maybe TCU. It was somebody
TCU, I think.
TCU.
Yeah,
It was and TCU was ranked. They were 24. The Big 12 is great at basketball, but they had just beat Kansas the week before that. They had just beat Kansas pretty decisively as well. I think they beat them by at least 7 or 8. You talk about Virginia Tech. I don't go into these games like I mean, granted, we won 3 games. We beat NC State. We beat Clemson. Clemson was before that. We lost to there was a loss after the Clemson game to somebody, but
the UVA
Miami.
one.
the UVA game.
No.
UVA game. Yeah. But we beat NC State. We beat that NC State's a good team. They're like they're in the conference. Beat NC State, beat Georgia Tech, beat Boston College, who we haven't beaten yet. And it starts to see things are starting to turn up, and we're starting to play better basketball. And they don't play bad against Duke, and they don't play bad against Miami. But
They played 5 minutes bad.
But the same mistakes that have hindered the entire season come back and bite you. And all of a sudden, we're now talking about, we're not talking about being on the bubble anymore. We're talking about, are we going to make the NIT? And part of that, let's be real, part of that is the media, really not giving the ACC the credit they deserve. You see that anybody in the ACC can win any given night. You have Georgia Tech, who is, I think, last in the ACC right now, just beat North Carolina, who's third in the country.
And they beat Duke, right?
Yeah, you have Clemson, who as of right now just beat North Carolina again, who North Carolina just beat Duke. It happens any given night.
Clemson got hosed on a foul call against Duke.
Exactly.
They did. Yeah,
You can
that was
see
not
that.
a
You have teams that can win any given night. Virginia started awful. They lost to Notre Dame. They lost to Louisville, or I don't think they lost to Louisville, but they struggled against Louisville. They lost to North Carolina State. They lost to Wake Forest. And all of a sudden, Virginia's won 7 or 8 in a row.
Yeah, I think they're third in the ACC now.
Exactly, and you see that like the ACC is so hard to win so hard to win against other teams, especially on the road. And it's people say that ACC is cannibalizing itself, but in reality, the ACC is just gonna, they'll put 3 or 4 teams in the tournament, and I bet you 3 of those 4 teams go to the Sweet 16, just like every other year.
What year was
like
it?
Syracuse back in the day.
Yeah,
2022 when it was the same year that Tech won the ACC tournament.
Yeah,
they said that the ACC wasn't going to do anything in the tournament, and all of a sudden you have Duke playing UNC in the Final Four.
Yeah, and let's not stop there.
Awesome.
Let's not stop there. You had Miami go to the Elite Eight
last
that year. They went to the Final Four last year. The year before that, they go to the Elite Eight. They lose to Kansas, I believe. The year before that, or that year, we also had Notre Dame go to the Sweet 16 from the first 4 with
right.
They had Shasowski or whatever his name was, and they went nuts. Cormac Ryan was playing for them. Dane Leonard and they were good. If Virginia Tech doesn't, I'm trying to think who else made. There was I think 5 teams that made the Sweet 16 from the ACC. There's another team that I'm missing. Last year you had Pittsburgh go on a little bit of a run. Virginia Tech doesn't have to play Texas on their best shooting night of the season. They're winning. It's I don't have the time of day for the media members that talk about the ACC not being good. I don't know. There's nothing we can do about it. Obviously, that's why we're sitting here yapping about it, because we're just we're passengers to it. But
wasn't that the UNC Duke matchup? Wasn't that like a 4 versus an 8?
Yeah, I think Duke was
close like that.
Duke was a 2 and North Carolina was an 8. North Carolina was an 8 seed.
Yeah, because
that
that
was
Coach K's last year, right?
Yep.
That was Coach K's last year.
They played Baylor.
They played Baylor, and they beat Baylor big.
They smoked them.
So that road wasn't easy. Wasn't easy.
Baylor was a 1.
They were the 1.
They were a 1 seed. They were defending champions, and they came back and they whooped them. They had Brady Manick went off for them. Caleb Love played a great tournament, and and then you turn around. North Carolina is the preseason number 1, and you're talking about how the ACC's bad again. NC State doesn't have a great season, or North Carolina doesn't have a great season. Virginia kind of played a decent season. They were probably the ACC's best team for most of the season. Duke was really good again, obviously. They played a good second half of the season. But it's year after year, especially recently, where the ACC's down, but they turn up when March comes around, and all of a sudden you're talking about teams playing. You have ACC teams playing in big games, right? So it's it's the same way that I feel about when people say that Mike Young needs to go. I mean, the ACC is hard to win at. It's obviously we're not where we want it to be, but it's just the nature of the ACC. You've seen that when things are going the way that Mike Young's Mike coaches, Tech's not beatable. When they're running their offense, when they're passing the ball, when they're making the right play, when they're not turning the ball over, when they're playing good defense, they're not beatable, and it's not close. When you have the hot hands on fire, it's not close. When Hunter Couture is hitting shots, when Tyler Nichols hitting transition threes, when Sean Padula is making the right play, it's not close. But when they fail to do those things, honestly, even when they're turning the ball over 17, 18 times per game, you're not going to win very many of them. And that's kind of where we're at. Yeah.
I mean, I don't feel like they really. I mean, yeah, they get beat, but I feel like sometimes it's the nature of how many times are you going to shoot yourself in the foot at the last 10 minutes. I mean, I understand the team's not bad. I mean, sometimes you'd like there to be another option other than pulling a 3. Like you'd like to have a RJ Davis take over, or a Filipowski, just go to work in the paint. But
We don't got
I
the
mean,
money for those
I mean,
guys.
and I believe that we'll start to get help as it goes on. But I mean, the team's not nearly as bad as the record shows. But it's just frustrating when you turn on predictions for March Madness and you have a team that we beat, Vermont, get projected just to go right on into the tournament as a 14 or whatever. Yeah, I mean, you don't want Tech to be a 14, but when you have teams like that are just going to get a bid in and all that, you'd like the Hokies to still be able to get in. I mean, obviously, it's by conference and stuff, but I mean, I understand. I understand. Winners of the conferences go. But it's just a point. You just would like to see Tech back in there.
Yeah, I think the point of that is that you can tell that Tech's able to compete in the tournament. They're competitive against teams that are going to be in the tournament. Clemson just got another big win. They're probably going to put them on the right side of the bubble. They had a great non-conference. We still have games against, North Carolina, who, I mean, obviously we've just seen that they are beatable in Chapel Hill, right? They just lost. Exactly. By 20, right? They beat them by a lot.
We smoked them.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. It takes a hot hand and a good, fundamentally sound game, but it's possible. Which is why, we're talking about looking ahead. I don't think all hope's lost. I don't obviously we're kind of in that territory like 2022, probably more so like last year, where you think we're going to have to win the tournament to get to the final or get to the tournament. But if we're being real, we talk about all the games that we have coming up. This upcoming week, we have games against Notre Dame on Saturday in South Bend, and then back at home on Tuesday against Florida State. I'm pretty sure the Castle Guard is going to be rocking again with free shirts. It's going to be a big game. You win both of those, and you're right back in the same situation you were going into Duke, where the next game's against North Carolina in Chapel Hill, who's going to be a top 10 team unless they keep losing. But you beat them in Chapel Hill. That's a quad one win. That's big. Then you turn the corner, you come back to Blacksburg, you beat Virginia in Blacksburg, and you've put two of them back to back. That's two big wins, and then all of a sudden you have a run down the stretch against teams like Pittsburgh, Syracuse, and Wake. It's not like it's out of the picture to maybe make a run. We have big wins against Boise State, Iowa State, Clemson, obviously. Those are teams that are most likely going to be in the tournament, most definitely going to be in the tournament. But it doesn't matter if you can't not turn the ball over. Truthfully, we talk about it's like football. It's like we can talk about the hypotheticals all the time, but you gotta get down to business. You gotta do what you gotta do. Talk about Notre Dame. I think that's a game we can win. I think that's a really big game that we can win. It's almost been another house of horrors. We ended up winning last year. We don't play in Notre Dame. We don't play in South Bend a lot because it's not one of our protected rivals. We play there like twice every 3 years, maybe. But our game got canceled in COVID, I believe. We played last year, and Basili had a great game. He's from Wisconsin. He did good. So, we're talking about, just to get ready to wrap this part up. Talk about the tournament. We're kind of in a situation where we're probably going to end up playing on the first night of the ACC tournament unless things turn around soon. That's not a good situation. You want to at least get to you want to get to the 7 is basically the sweet spot. You want to avoid the number 1 team in the ACC if you're going to, and you don't want to play on the first day. And if that doesn't happen, we're going to be, packing our bags for the NIT.
I mean, it's doable though. We did it in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, right? We won 4 games in a row.
Yeah, 2022 when we won the tournament, we won 4 games in a row. Obviously there was a lot of adversity you had to face then, but you beat the 1, 2, and the 3 in the ACC, as well as a team that had just beaten you the weekend before. Clemson was like the perfect match for Tech, and you beat all 4 of them, and you have one of the best runs in Hokie history.
The buzzer beater.
But
buzzer beater set it all up.
Exactly. So it's
all
definitely
it takes is good shot selection too.
Yeah, it's
you can't take bad shots. You're not
it's
going to win
definitely
like that.
not anything that is out of the picture for the Hokies. It's just something that they gotta lock in. They gotta put the straps on. They gotta rally around each other and play good basketball, and that's all it comes down to it. For men's basketball. So that's just about gonna wrap us up for our first episode. Definitely have a lot of improvements. Definitely got a lot of we'll get smoother, and we'll learn how to talk, and we won't have our vibrations going on in the background the entire time. But it was fun, and we have a lot of fun stuff to talk about. We got a lot of big games to talk about when we come at you next week. Hopefully on the other side of at least a couple of big Hokie wins. Yeah. So thank you guys. If you guys are listening, if you guys have made it to this point, thank you for listening. You'll catch us on YouTube. We're hoping to get our stuff out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and everything like that soon, but you'll definitely catch us on YouTube. Huge shout out to our the man behind the scenes, Isaac, who's been here listening to us yap for an hour and 17 minutes. Yeah, pass it to Zach real fast.
Yeah, and like we said in the opener, we're not just talking about basketball here. So we want to give a shout out to teams starting the season here soon. Softball, they start February 9th. They go down to Auburn, I believe. They play Illinois and Auburn. And then women's lacrosse, they start VCU on Saturday. So good luck to those 2 teams. And hopefully we can talk some good things about them too in the future.
Yep. So that's gonna about do it for us. If you guys haven't, buy your tickets for North Carolina for women's basketball coming up on February 25th. Let's make a big trip. Get the Hokie faithful out to Charlottesville on March 3rd to support the women's basketball team, and find your way to games. Come to Castle, get loud, get rowdy. That's what makes Hokie Nation. Spring games coming up. There's a lot of big stuff going on in Blacksburg coming up. A lot of stuff to be excited about. A lot of stuff that's going to be watched on TV. We're going to have a great time. Hoping to come out on the positive side of a lot of these things. But until then, we will catch you next time on Exit Late.
Peace.